Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about agoraphobia, what it is, how we deal with it, and ultimately how we get the other side of it. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tim Box. I'm a mind coach and an anxiety therapist. Every day I see clients one-to-one to help them deal with all sorts of anxiety related issues. And I also run this channel where I answer the big anxiety related questions. The question I'm going to be answering today is this one. Any advice for dealing with agoraphobia? Anything I have to go to, maybe 6 months into the future, I will convince myself that I can't do it because anxiety has got into my head. So agoraphobia could be described as a fear of going into open or crowded spaces, a fear of leaving our home, or a fear of being somewhere where there's no easy route of escape. And the things we might traditionally expect to be afraid of, things like becoming a victim of an accident or some crime if we step outside of our front door, and this might come from a bad experience we've had in the past. There could also be a fear of contracting or developing some kind of illness. And during the time of COVID, when we were all in lockdown, as we were just coming out of lockdown, I was seeing a lot of clients who had developed some type of agoraphobia, simply because for the last 2 years, we had been told and been very aware of the fact that stepping outside of our front door could be bad for us. And the final thing that we might be afraid of is maybe humiliating or embarrassing ourselves in front of others. And in that respect, we could describe agoraphobia as some type of social anxiety. But for all these things we might traditionally expect to be afraid of, in my experience of working one-to-one with clients, the thing that we're most afraid of isn't the outside world, but our response to it. We're not fearing the challenges that we might expect to encounter. We're fearing what that will do to us. Will it trigger our anxiety? Will it trigger panic? As with so many things regarding anxiety, we're not anxious about the thing itself. We're anxious about our perceived ability to cope with the thing. And when we're dealing with agoraphobia, we very much regard our safe haven to be our home space. We start to treat it a little bit like our medicine that we can't be too far away from. So if we had a heart condition, we might have pills that we need to make sure are about our person at all times. If we have asthma, we might have a pump that we need to make sure we've always got on us no matter where we go. And in this instance, with agoraphobia, home represents that medicine that we can't be too far away from. And that's because if we were to have high anxiety or a panic response, then we can always dart back to our safe haven. Whilst we might still be anxious in our own home, our home itself becomes that thing that represents the place we're least likely to have the high end of anxiety or the panic response. And even if we were to, at least we're at home. So what can we do about this? How do we actually get to the stage where we can comfortably and confidently leave our home again and re-engage with the outside world? Well, the first thing that's worth remembering here is that we're only really afraid of the outside world, not because of what the world has to offer us, but because of what we're imagining might happen when we go out there. We're only actually afraid because we have a really powerful imagination. The things that we can imagine are inevitably far worse than the things that actually happen to us. And armed with that knowledge, there's a few things we can change about our own responses. I'm going to talk about 3 things that are useful to remind ourselves whenever we're experiencing anxiety about going out into the outside world. The first thing is that the likelihood of the bad thing happening is a lot less likely than we actually imagine. So we might have experience of bad things occurring when we've gone outside. We might have lots of cases that we could cite about negative experiences that we've had outside of our home. But in reality, when we add that up against all the other times where not much happened at all, we find out that 99.999 recurring percent of the time, life's pretty boring. Even the people that lead the most thrill-seeking lives that we could possibly imagine, the majority of their life is still fairly uneventful. All that we've done here is done that very natural, negatively biased thing that our mind does, where we look at the bad things, we inflate them into huge things in our mind, and we make the mistake of thinking they happen more often than they actually do. In reality, when we seek to go outside of our house, we can do so with the expectation that not much of any consequence is really going to happen at all unless we deliberately choose to make it happen. The second thing worth remembering is that the consequences of bad things happening are far less severe than we imagine. Yes, we might remember times of struggle, but what we imagine happening in the future far outweighs the actual impact of anything negative that did happen to us. Even the things that were really impactful, even the things that were terrible, the result of them was that we got the other side of them and we moved on. The fact we're still here and we're still alive suggests that the consequences of negative experiences aren't as severe as we're imagining them to be. And the final thing worth remembering is that our ability to cope is far greater than we're currently giving ourselves credit. Yes, we know there are times in our life when we've struggled, and we know that at the moment we might regard ourselves as a slightly less resourceful, maybe even diminished version of ourselves because we're experiencing high anxiety and maybe even episodes of panic. But remember, anxiety isn't there deliberately trying to incapacitate you. Anxiety is trying to protect you from harm. And what that means is that should a genuine large challenge arise, what will probably happen is that we'll find it within ourselves and we'll grab the resources required to overcome that challenge. And this isn't some flight of fancy. This is based on experience. Every challenge we've ever faced, we've overcome it in some way or another, with no reason to believe that anything that happens in the future won't work out the same. But here's perhaps the most important thing to remember, especially if we're fearing our own anxiety response. The next time we decide, right, I'm going to go out the front door, I'm actually going to make it happen this time, I think we can legitimately expect that will come with some anxiety. It would kind of be weird if it didn't at this point. Because if you're watching this video and you're dealing with agoraphobia, you're well used to anxiety rising up in you whenever you think about going outside of your front door. That's perfectly natural when you've got all this experience of struggling with that idea. Yes, there will be a point in the future where going out of your house is commonplace and you barely think about it at all, and you certainly don't feel excessively anxious about it. But it would be weird if that was now, at this moment. So when you go to do this, expect to feel anxiety because that's perfectly natural and understandable and perfectly healthy at this phase in your journey. Your job isn't to instantly just suddenly feel fine about this. Your job is to go out the front door anyway, knowing that you can trust yourself and that you can rely on your own responses, and knowing that feeling anxious isn't anything to worry about. Then what you get to do is you get to engage with the world again and realize that what happens is the other side of any anxiety, you start to feel better. You start to realize that actually I am safe. I can deal with the challenges that are outside my front door. And I can even deal with the challenges that come from within as well. So the next time you choose to do this and leave your front door, get out there and re-engage with the world, understand that, yeah, you'll feel uncomfortable for a certain amount of time. But the inevitable conclusion of that is that it passes. Get out there, learn that you're safe and that you can do this. If this video has resonated with you, then I strongly advise you watch the next one that's recommended at the end, because it concerns panic itself. Understanding panic gives us the tools to realize why we don't actually need to fear it anymore.